of the the 5 branches, what made you choose the Army?
My grandfather. My grandfather was an infantryman through the Korean War and World War II. And that was the one from the sister battalion that I served under. And I always heard the greatest stories about him. I've always known my grandfather be a very loving man, but to hear the heroic things that he was done in his career just spoke a complete opposite of everything that I grew up with. And so I always had a curiosity about what that was.
When you say a complete opposite of what you grew up with, so you heard the stories that he did a lot of good. Was he alive while you were growing up?
He was, yeah.
And was he open about his military career?
He wasn't. And that was probably the thing, because like the only thing I saw was this big, giant, jolly man with a big old beard on his face. And he always had a big hug for you. He was always a loving kind of grandfather. And so to hear the trials that he had gone through in his life really sparked an interest to me.
Did he serve a career?
He did, yeah. Yep.
So you've got a lot of career military in your family, not just, hey, I'll do my 4 years and get out.
Right.
And so for you, when you were going in, were you thinking career?
I was thinking career. I didn't want to do something and do it half-ass. Just not that type of person. So when I did it, I had planned to go all the way. But once I got injured, things kind of changed. A lot of things happened in those 2 years that I spent in country. And by the time I was done, I was really done with it.
Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantiani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this. I started this podcast a little over a year ago. September 2021, it went live.
Oh, okay.
And it kind of grew out of a project that I was doing at work. And then I just kind of thought, let me see where this goes. And then initially I was just going to kind of focus on law enforcement. And when I really started digging into it, the one thing that really became important to me was the fact that both careers, military and the first responder community, do a great job of luring us in. They recruit very well. Hey, look at all the cool things you can do and look at all the opportunities you have. But when it comes time to walk out the door, a lot of times it's like, don't let the door hit you on the way out, And I know on the military side, they have the TAPS program. But most of the people that I've talked to, you get to a point where you're just done and you're, all right, I'm ready to be out of the military. And so you're not really paying attention to the TAPS program. You're just like, let me just check the box and get out of here. And so my ultimate goal is just to, from a selfish side of things, talk to interesting people and learn interesting stories. And I've had the opportunity already to meet some very interesting people and hear some very interesting stories. But more importantly is I really believe that everyone's story is different, and how you tell your story is going to resonate different with somebody than if I said the same thing myself, if that kind of makes sense. Right. And so equally important to me is the backbone of this podcast is, all right, the most important thing you need to do is you need to be thinking about your exit out, because these careers, they aren't forever. Right. If you're lucky enough to go all the way to retirement, great, but you still have time to do something afterwards. The other side of it is you're an extreme example of an injury, but you could just blow out a knee, you could blow out a back or whatever, where it's not debilitating to where you can't go get another job. But if it's just forced upon you and you haven't thought about, well, what will I do after this? Then that becomes, and I've talked to several people already who've said, I didn't have a plan. And that was part of their downfall, is they kind of got into that spiral of drinking, because they didn't know what they were going to do. Right. And they put so much of their identity in, whether a first responder or military, in that uniform. And when they didn't have that, it's like, well, now what? The other thing is that, as we all know, you read the news every day, the number of suicides just keeps going up and up. And I honestly believe, I've got a friend of mine who's a psychologist, and she says part of it is that's just a mirror of society. first responder and military community are the same percentage of overall society. Okay, fine. But I do believe that we can have an active impact in trying to prevent that. And so for me, it's been very important to present guests who have dealt with the mental health issues, pull themselves out of it, or presenting guests who are in those fields, helping others and kind of giving advice of like, hey, this is what you kind of need to do. And then obviously the other part of it is, and I'm sure you remember from when you were when you were active, there were those senior people who you looked at them and you're like, you haven't taken care of yourself. Maybe not as much for the military, because I know the military does have mandatory physical fitness, where law enforcement and first responders, a lot of them don't. And so in my career, I've seen those people who haven't taken care of their health. You know, they get to their retirement age, they're severely obese, they're out of shape. They can't, even if they wanted to go enjoy retirement, they aren't in a physical sense able to do that.
Yeah.
And so with that, I also interview guests who are either giving back to the law enforcement and military, kind of like how we met at that the veterans event. So it's telling people, hey, prepare for tomorrow, but take care of yourself today. So that's kind of the encapsulation of what the podcast is about.
I dig it. That's awesome.
Do you want me to grab you a bottle of water?
I'm okay.
You sure?
Yeah.
So before we go forward, let's start with where were you born?
I was born in Hawaii, on the island of Oahu, on the North Shore. Parents are from there, grew up there, born there, raised there. I'm the youngest of four, so when we moved to California, I was about 6 years old. Father was a seaman in the Navy, and he chose to raise us out here after he retired.
So he retired, and then you guys came to the mainland?
No, he retired in San Diego, and then we moved to Temecula here in town, and he became an LEO for Riverside Sheriff's Department first, and then he retired from Temecula Police Department.
And you mentioned you're four. You were one of four, and growing up, well, when you came here at 6 years old, did you really realize you were leaving Hawaii, and how did it upset you at all?
I knew that we were leaving, all of our families back there. But we are, the four of us children were all raised pretty close. We were really raised in a church going household. Father was pretty strict. Mother was loving. So we had everything that we kind of needed.
Kind of balanced it out.
Yeah, absolutely. But amongst all of those things that we had, the four of us children having to pull together no matter where we went was something that always was prevalent. So moving out here to California wasn't so much that we didn't want to move away from home, because we had already moved. My father had retired in San Diego, so we'd been up here for a couple of years, and it was, as long as we were around each other, we just had everything that we needed.
What's the age range between you being the youngest and your oldest?
So me being the youngest and the oldest is a 10-year gap, and then everybody falls between 2 or 3 years.
Had you experienced a lot of moving prior to coming to California?
Just being born in Hawaii and then moving to San Diego and then moving to Temecula. Once we had settled here in Temecula, we didn't move. And so I had been raised here for the most part since elementary school. So
you've really seen the area change.
Yeah, absolutely.
And growing up, what took up your time? Were you active into sports?
I was active into sports, but not until high school. And up until then, it was just running around with my brother, riding bikes, getting into trouble, and hanging out with our friends. We're going to
obviously talk about, your jiu-jitsu journey, but did you do any wrestling or anything as a kid?
In high school. I was the youngest of four, so my parents kind of had an eye on the older children, and I kind of didn't make my breakthrough until I hit high school. I had a little bit of freedom to kind of do things on my own a little bit, and I ran with it. Being the youngest, were you able to get away with more, or were you more kind of a squared away kid? I didn't really get away with a whole lot. I definitely got in trouble for the things that I did. And so it kind of, I guess I learned from a young age, and definitely being the youngest, I'd seen examples from my older siblings. So I guess I just had a different mindset.
Did you have military as in your path for your future as a young age, or did it come later?
No, but I do come from a military family. My grandfather was in the Army, actually the sister battalion that I served in the Army. And then my father had retired from the Navy, brothers went into the Navy, brother in the Marine Corps, and me in the Army. So the option was always there. The examples were always there. But I don't think I pulled the trigger on it until I was about 20 years old.
Any of your other siblings go in the military?
I got a brother in the Navy and a brother in the Marine Corps.
So I guess where I'm going with that, was it pushed by your dad to?
No, not at all. Not at all, actually. I don't know how any of us decided to join, to tell you the truth. And especially, there's so many of us that have gripes with our father and the way that we were raised. And my God, this man was so hard and he was crazy. And there's just stories all over the place. But it was definitely a choice that I made on my own.
When you and your siblings decided to go in, was your dad supportive of it, or was it kind of like, what are you making this decision for?
Yeah, our parents love us. So whatever we chose to do, they were going to support. So we always had that support.
From their side of it, what do you think they wanted? Like, was there talk of what they wanted you to do as adults? Was college on the horizon?
No, actually, none of that was. I don't think we had the money to go to school anyway. And so if we were going to go to school, it was going to be by our own doing, which probably would have been the military or going to loan debt. I didn't want to do that.
Was there ever any talk of your parents, especially like once your dad retired, to go back to Hawaii?
No, we live our life out here. From the oldest sibling to me, started having kids. So once my parents were starting to see grandchildren, it was kind of lamented that we were staying here.
So what year did you graduate high school?
2000.
And you knew at that point you were going in?
No, at that point, I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to get out of Temecula. I wanted to get out of my parents' house. And so at the age of 17, that's exactly what I did. I had a cousin that lives in Alaska. And so I moved out there, started working, found a job, did all kinds of stuff under the sun out there in Alaska. And then I joined the military from out there.
So that's a unique path. What was it like your first winter in Alaska?
I was lost.
Coming from Southern California.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been in the snow, but I had never been in the snow.
Well, not Alaska snow. I mean,
everything kind of tends to look the same. Once that snow hits, I woke up in the morning and I couldn't recognize anything. It was crazy. But aside from not having a vehicle with studs on it or four-wheel drive, it was a rough winter, that first one.
And how many years did you end up spending up there?
I spent 3 before joining.
And did you enjoy it, or?
I loved it. I don't know if you've been to Alaska, but
I've not.
It is gorgeous.
Where were you at in Alaska?
Anchorage, Wasilla, and Eagle River.
And obviously I've heard of Anchorage. Where for the most of part of your time there, were you in bigger cities or more remote areas?
More remote areas.
And what were you doing up there?
Working as a truck driver, working in a warehouse. What else? Construction, Chinese buffet cook. So 18 to 20 something, I found a lot of things to do.
If you were enjoying it up there, what pushed the?
I was enjoying it up until I had gotten to some personal issues with family and friends, and I felt my life was going down the wrong path. And because of all the people that I'd brought into my life living out there, I didn't see it going too much further than that. And so I was looking for a way out. How can I get out? Military is a good door to open. And it fit. Was
it just limited opportunities, or did you actually see yourself going down a path of potentially ending yourself up in trouble?
It was girl trouble, and I didn't want to be around it anymore. I was kind of done with it. I'd really fallen in love with this young lady, and she had a kid, and I fell in love with the kid. And then it just went sour. And then I didn't want to be around it. I didn't want to be seeing them in a grocery store when I'm going to grab groceries or anything like that. We lived in the same city. And I just wanted to get out of it.
And of the 5 branches, what made you choose the Army?
My grandfather. My grandfather was an infantryman through the Korean War and World War II. And that was the one from the sister battalion that I served under. And I always heard the greatest stories about him. I've always known my grandfather be a very loving man, but to hear the heroic things that he was done in his career just spoke a complete opposite of everything that I grew up with. And so I always had a curiosity about what that was.
When you say a complete opposite of what you grew up with, so you heard the stories that he did a lot of good. Was he alive while you were growing up?
He was, yeah.
And was he open about his military career?
He wasn't. And that was probably the thing, because like the only thing I saw was this big, giant, jolly man with a big old beard on his face. And he always had a big hug for you. He was always a loving kind of grandfather. And so to hear the trials that he had gone through in his life really sparked an interest to me.
Did he serve a career?
He did, yeah. Yep.
So you've got a lot of career military in your family, not just, hey, I'll do my 4 years and get out.
Right.
And so for you, when you were going in, were you thinking career?
I was thinking career. I didn't want to do something and do it half-ass. Just not that type of person. So when I did it, I had planned to go all the way. But once I got injured, things kind of changed. A lot of things happened in those 2 years that I spent in country. And by the time I was done, I was really done with it.
So what year did you go in?
I went in 2002, and I'd gotten blown up in 2008. Yeah.
And when you went in, what did you want to do? Did you just want to go infantry?
I wanted to go infantry. Yeah.
And so let's fast forward then. So how many times did you ultimately deploy?
I deployed twice. The first one was to Afghanistan. It was for 15 months. 03 to 04. And then again in 04 to 05, and then 06 to 07 in Iraq.
And your injury occurred when?
In Iraq.
What?
It was month 14 with 2 weeks left to go home.
So to actually boil it down, specific date that it occurred?
May 8th, 2009.
And can you kind of walk us through what exactly happened?
So we were, it was one of the last missions. We were the battalion that was trading off with the incoming unit. And so, we'd gone on a patrol. We had a very high speed commanding officer of the battalion, or of the company. And so he had wanted to run missions up until like the last few days before of us pulling out. So one of those last missions was doing a cordon search of a village, and my squad was an inserting squad. So we send the squad into the village, breaks up the village. You have the whole village surrounded by the security forces, and then the inserting teams just do their job. While we were inserting into the village, we started taking fire, took a knee, and then when I got up to run, it exploded underneath my foot. So.
In that moment, several angles that I want to go on with this. How soon did you know you were gravely injured?
So I was on a knee. I stood up. I heard this big bang, felt it in my soul, and then I couldn't move, and I just kind of fell back. And I wasn't sure at that point how bad it was. My brothers were coming up to me, making sure I was okay. Called in a bird, and I didn't realize how bad it was until they put me onto the bird. And it wasn't a first aid flight. And so they just had a Black Hawk. They moved everything off the floor and they shoved me on top. And when they shoved me on the floor of the bird, I felt my boot hit my hip. And I looked down and I saw my boot, and I realized that leg was...
It's not supposed to be. My boot shouldn't be at my hip.
Right. I knew at that point my leg was gone. And then when I woke up in the hospital, probably a couple weeks after that, it was my wife that woke me up, and my arm was bandaged heavily. I wasn't sure what was underneath the bandage, but I did have an itching feeling in my hand. And so I was pretty darn certain that my hand was there. And so I had asked my wife to take a pen or something, stick it under there and scratch my hand. And then she looked at me and she said, "Wally, your hand's gone." And that, I don't know why, but hearing that kind of kind of broke my spirits a little bit. I'm right-handed, so everything, I love drawing. I love doing everything with my hands. And just hearing that, it was just, it was a downer, huge downer. But like I said, it was my wife who told it to me. I had a 6-month-old daughter in her arms.
Was that your first child?
That was my first child, yeah. And I realized how lucky I was to be laying there looking at both of them. And so it wasn't very long that feeling stuck around, but I'll definitely remember that distinct feeling.
I've talked to and read in stories of soldiers who have been injured significantly. And one of the things that they deal with are children who come in and remember them when they were whole.
Oh my gosh.
And having to deal with seeing daddy or mommy. You know,
I have friends that have same situation.
Fortunately, your daughter only knows you now one way.
So thankful.
Which hospital were you in at this point?
I was at Walter Reed.
And how long did you end up spending there?
I was there for about 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and then they had opened up Balboa in San Diego for injured veterans, and so they were accepting, and I was probably one of the first or second batches of soldiers coming into the hospital. And
that initial period of, like you mentioned, where you have to rationalize, I no longer have my right hand, I no longer have my right leg. And for those who are not watching, you're amputated just below the elbow on your right and just below the knee on your right leg.
Just above the knee on my right leg.
That initial transition of accepting that, was it a hard transition for you? Or, I mean, I don't think anybody ever, I can't imagine anybody ever says it's easy, but was it?
I think there's things that make it easy. It just depends on your spirit, what kind of person you are, how much you have inside of you to pull through the situation. For myself, it was a big mixed bag, and it wasn't the easiest thing. I can't imagine anybody who misses limbs has an easy time coping with it. But I made it work.
Obviously, I'm assuming you had a lot of support from your family.
Yeah. Yep. My father had taken an early retirement so that he can come and help my wife take care of me and my daughter. And so I had that. And I have a very strong wife.
For you, was there ever a point where the military gave you the option, or you thought about finding a way to get prosthesis and redeploy or stay in?
That was not happening, actually. And it wasn't until I had gone through all my therapy that I had heard about the first one go to return back to combat. And I think that if I had the option to do so, I probably would have taken it.
So it wasn't even
It wasn't an option, yeah.
And is it something that, could you have gone back and tried to fight for it, or was it just you were too far past being able to?
Too far past, both for myself and for my family.
And what was the process like getting used to using prosthetics?
Crazy.
Because there's somebody that I work with who knows you, and you may not know him by name, but his name is Thane. And he remembers running into you at a gym quite a few years ago and watching you work out and basically coming in with your bag of accessories. And I want to get into that, but just, I'm assuming that wasn't your first venture into prosthetics. It was probably very basic prosthetics.
Yeah. Going to the hospital, I was blessed with physical therapists that would push me both mentally and physically and never let me sulk. I never had the opportunity to just sit there and feel sorry for myself. And I think the fact that I had stayed so busy with such a strong support system that I kind of turned a blind eye to any kind of weakness that I might have been feeling at the time. And so everything was just straightforward, 100%, fast as I can go. And I didn't hit that wall until years later, but there was no way that I could have failed coming out of the hospital without that much support.
And so moving forward and getting into your normal life, for somebody who might be, if they're listening to this and just starting their process, maybe they've been injured, what are some of the initial things that advice you could give from just that initial transition?
I think the biggest thing for me was just being strong for myself. I did have a lot of support. I had a wife who loved and supported me. But if you're not willing to do it yourself, if you don't believe in yourself that you can pull through these things, then you might not, and my mindset was just on point. I was very strong-minded before I had gotten blown up, and I think that stuck with me.
Making the transition to wanting to move forward with your life, I'll loosely call it that, and wanting to get into working out, and we're going to talk about Jiu Jitsu and stuff like that. But as far as getting the prosthesis to be able to work out, are there different pieces that you need and have, how did they come about? By my activity level. So when I was in the hospital, one of those physical therapists asked me, "What do you want to do, Wally? What do you want to do with your time here? What do you want to get back into? What do you want to try that's new? Anything." And one of the biggest things for me was getting back on a surfboard, getting into the ocean and paddling into some waves. Wasn't sure if I could do it. Always loved it. And so that was my number one thing on my list. So we started in a pool, started paddling on a board in the pool, started swimming lengths of the pool. My cardiovascular improved, my health improved, my physical fitness improved. And by the time we were ready to go into the ocean, it was a breeze. It was almost like I had my limbs again. But it wouldn't have been that smooth if I wasn't walked into it the way that I was. Did you get with a surf-specific physical therapy person, or did the person just happen to go, "Hey, this is what we're going to try"?
So this was in Balboa, San Diego. It really is true that a lot of people who live in San Diego surf.
No, I don't believe you.
But my physical therapist was an avid surfer. She had surfboards. She put me on them, and I felt safe. She had a good rapport with Del Mar 15th Street lifeguards. And so it was every Friday, every Tuesday, and sometimes I think Thursdays, we would go out there, surf with the lifeguards. Any help that we needed, they were there to give it to me. And as time progressed, more and more guys would join us. Started off with a buddy of mine, Bryce. He's also an avid surfer now too. But after Bryce, just more and more guys were coming out. It became a very big thing, very therapeutic thing. And it became very supported by local surf companies down there in San Diego by the hospital.
Have you heard of One More Wave?
One More Wave? I don't think I have.
They're a nonprofit out of San Diego. They do surf therapy for injured and disabled veterans.
Awesome.
So I'll put you in touch with them when we get done. So with going surfing, you obviously grew up surfing then. So that was something that you really wanted to get back into. I'm going to ask a really weird question, or did it come back right away? Or obviously, I'm assuming you had to get used to.
All of my trial and errors took place in the pool. That learning how to float on a board, learning how to sit on a board. And once we got out into the ocean, it wasn't 100% smooth, but it was a lot smoother than it would have been had I not. And so it did take a little bit of time. It probably took me about a week before I was up going up down on a board, but I was determined and I got it.
So when you're surfing, are you only using a hand prosthetic or using a hand and leg?
I use no prosthetic. I go nub down with my nub on the back of the board, kind of steering the tail end, and my hand grabbing the rail.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking in my mind, if you were using prosthetics, even with a prosthetic, you're still going to be off balance.
Yeah.
So you had to completely relearn, I'll give it, your center of gravity.
Right. Yep.
And with surfing being the first thing that you wanted to do, when did the more advanced working out get into your mindset?
I grew up working out and having a love for my time in the weight room. And so that was something that never left me. Even in my mind, I knew it would never leave me. As I started getting and gaining prosthetic use, that was on the top of the list, was hitting the gym again. And so it was easy for me to get back into the gym. it was just finding the right prosthetics to support me doing it. And I was blessed with amazing prosthetists who know their job well.
Now, did you have to push for that, or was the VA very willing to work with you to get you what you needed?
During that time, I was still in the military going through the therapy, and it wasn't until like a year and a half later that the military had released me. And then that's when I picked up the VA benefits. And I have no complaints with anything from the VA. I have been taken care of well, and my needs run very short.
How different are the prosthetics for your day-to-day as opposed to working out?
My leg is the same leg that I take into the gym. The only thing that changes is I don't always wear an arm in my day unless it's specific that I would need it. I always wear an arm to the gym, and I have a workout arm with several attachments that I use while I'm in there.
And was that easy to adjust to?
It was. Yeah. Yeah. There was more like of a stoke level for me just to be in the gym, just to be underneath those weights, just to be able to push those off my chest, just be able to squat.
Because you're not strong at all. I mean, for somebody who's been smashed by you, you're not strong at all.
Oh, man. Yeah. No, I love lifting weights. So, I mean, I knew in my mind that I would get it easily, and I was determined enough to do it.
For you, now that you're over a decade removed, what has progressed or what has had to be readapted? Because I would imagine your body still changes even as you age.
Most supremely, my mindset. The way I look at things, the way I treat people, the way I treat myself, the way I treat my children, my family, my wife, all of these things that require mental stability have grown supremely. Yes, my body is in good physical health and I'm able to do many things, but I think if my mindset wasn't so well adapted to what I'm going through, that I would have such a horrible time here.
I guess more what I was asking of, there's nothing that we own, a car, a TV, whatever, ourselves, that doesn't need to be addressed as we get older. With you and using prosthetics, is it something like this prosthetic that was fitted for me 10 years ago will always be fine? Or are you always in a...
They're always. I break things quick. I go into the gym and I'm pounding those weights. I lift like I used to lift, and that's something that I haven't given up. And so because I'm so heavy on those prosthetics, they break maybe once every 6 months, maybe a little bit sooner.
And it's no issue with the VA?
No issue. Isn't that amazing? I mean, that's one of the biggest things for me is that I've never had an issue despite my weight fluctuation, but despite me breaking running leg after running leg because of that fluctuation, because I'm so heavy with the lifting arms and I break them all the time, I never have an issue gaining new ones. Never have an issue having to go and ask or having to find them. It's been really easy, and such a big blessing, you know. And
you got put together, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the company that adapted your home.
Homes for Our Troops.
Now, how did that process come about?
Honestly, it was my wife for the most part. I had gotten out. We were looking for a place to live. My wife wanted to be somewhere around her family and mine. And so we chose Winchester. And so upon medically retiring out of the military, we bought a house in Winchester. That was our first house. And before purchasing that house, we had looked into organizations. Homes for Our Troops was one of them, but they just took a while to get back to me. And so we ended up purchasing the house, and then several years later, Homes for Our Troops had called us back, explained to us that our paperwork had been lost because they had to fire somebody who wasn't doing their job. And they asked if we still wanted the house, if we were still interested. And we said, of course. And so we were enrolled into the program immediately, taken care of, and the house was built in about 3 to 4 years.
So they don't take an existing house and adapt it to you. They actually build a house around you, so to speak. They have
like a set model of houses, and that's what they go off of. So there's several in this area. I have quite a few friends that all have the same house. We go to each other's house often. My kids are running around like they know where the bathroom is. They know where the secret cupboards are. It's kind of neat. But we're definitely blessed to have that little side family through Homes for Our Troops. No,
that's really cool. It's the first time I'd ever actually even heard about it. So I think it's really cool that they do that. And is that a private nonprofit or is that through the government?
Oh, it's a private nonprofit. They originated off the East Coast, out of Boston, Massachusetts, and they still run their organization out of there. And
oddly enough, once they hand the house over to you, though, it's kind of like your home. You don't go back to them for any issues?
So once they hand you the keys to your newly adapted home, you have about a 10-year grace period where you live in the home. It's your primary residence. And after the 10-year period, they sign the deed over to you.
Oh, okay.
So I'm approaching year 10 this year.
So it officially becomes yours after 10 years.
Yep.
So let's go into your jiu-jitsu journey. Where'd that come? When did the interest for that come about?
So I wrestled in high school. It was probably one of the most profound things that I had experienced at a young age. And the amount of sweat and pain that is produced in a wrestling room is lovely. It is one of the most, if you want to figure out who you are, what you're made of, join a wrestling team.
Well, and something you've already mentioned, and I wonder how much wrestling impacted on it, had its impact, but building that mental strength. Because you talk about coming out of your injury, and maybe you went through a small period of woe is me, but quickly it was, I'm back on it.
Yeah.
And I would imagine wrestling had to have a huge impact on that.
Absolutely. Anytime I think about struggles in my life, wrestling's always computed somewhere in that mix, you know? I don't think I'd be as strong as I am today without having gone through those things at a young age.
Was your wife kind of like, what the hell are you doing jiu-jitsu, or was she behind it from the get-go?
No, she was kind of worried and concerned, obviously, but she knew me and she knew my physical abilities. She knew how strong I was. And so she had trusted the process.
Did you know anybody else who was a disabled vet who was doing it, or did you just on your own go, hey, I'm going to go?
I didn't. And to be honest with you, I started with my kids. And after watching my kids on the mat and their love for it, I couldn't hold back.
Oh, so they started doing jiu-jitsu and then you're like, I need to get that itch back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you've been doing it now how long?
I've been off and on for the past 6 years. So my blue belt is weathered, but it is not consistent. But this is probably the most consistent I've been in the past year.
Well, you've definitely, I mean, having rolled with you and been smashed by you, you've definitely adapted yourself very well to it.
Thank you.
Did it come to you easy from your wrestling background, or did it take a long time to kind of really get to learn to work your body?
I would say it came easy. It definitely made sense. All of my understanding of balance and leverage was still there. And it was just the small things that I needed to critique and twist to make work. And I got that from our black belts. Poncho was a huge part of that. I know you know Poncho.
Yeah. So, yeah. When we got to roll at the We Defy event, have you done many of the veteran specific events?
I try to go to them, all of them when I see them. If I can make it, I'm definitely there.
What kind of impact have you had on other veterans, drawn them into jiu-jitsu? Injured veterans.
I try and drag my friends into this all the time. All of my friends, my amputee friends, my able-bodied friends. I swear I try and share like the importance almost on a spiritual level of what this is for me and the amazing environment that I roll in, the gentlemen and the women who are just amazing people, show up on the mats, give 100%, and they don't just give 100% wildly, they give 100% in a meaningful manner, meaning like they care about how much they're applying to you. They care about breaking your arm or not, right? And those kind of things to me are huge. And if they're showing that kind of respect to everybody on the mat, that's the place that I want to be. That's the place that I want to put my kids, you know? And I've been able to find that since starting it. So blessed.
I think that's one of the things that's definitely been a huge factor for me is just realizing that there are a lot of people out there They just want what's best for you.
Right.
And on the mats, they're like, okay, I'm going to try to kill you right now. But when we're done, we're going to slap hands and say, good job. And it is that community. It's a weird sense of family that you get. And so I can imagine how much that helps you in your mental health, right, moving forward. And with you mentioned your kids are they still active with it?
My daughter hated it from the start. She's a lot like my wife. She gets claustrophobic. She hates people sweating on her. I couldn't bear to keep her going in it if she didn't want to do it. But my son is his father's son, so he loves it.
How old's your boy?
He's 13. He plays football. He wrestles and does Jiu Jitsu.
Is he going to be a small man just like you?
Yeah, he's looking at it.
That's got to be fun though, rolling with him.
It is a lot of fun. He has for a 13-year-old, he has a pretty amazing physique. I have a home gym in my garage. He utilizes it the most. He loves lifting weights. He loves getting big. He loves his muscles. He loves eating, and he loves playing the guitar. And so it wasn't very hard to get him motivated in anything. You
mentioned enjoying art before your injury. Have you been able to adapt your left hand to
I sure have. Many days I sat on the table drawing with my children. I love to draw. They also have spawned a love for the same thing. And it wouldn't have happened if there weren't those days where I'd put a pad of paper on the table, threw some pencils and pens, and started drawing with my kids,
Where'd your love of art come from?
Oh, man. I don't know. I think it just started at a young age with friends, cartoons, just doodling in class, I guess.
Did you ever take any formalized art classes?
Not until high school. And there were graphic arts classes. And I love to draw with a pencil and pen, so a little bit different.
Any particular, if there was a style or when you sit down to draw, what are you in your mind looking to draw? Is it more figures? Is it more what I would call not nature, but like an entire picture?
An entire picture, probably. Are you familiar with the band Sublime?
Yeah.
Their artwork on their album covers and stuff like that. That's probably about right up my alley.
So kind of more of, I'll loosely call it an abstract style of art.
Yep.
And with being able to change to your left hand, does it make your drawing different? Is that sound like a weird question?
No, it doesn't sound like a weird question. I see where you're coming from, but what was amazing for me is that my mind still works very much in the same way. And so the way that my mind talks to my hand still works in the same way. It's just talking to a different hand. So I was really surprised myself to see like when I started doing it more, that they were starting to look a lot more like my right hand was producing it. And the more I did it, the more perfected they became. And so we had done it so much that when I draw something with my left hand, it doesn't look any different from what I used to draw with my right.
Is it something that you ever thought, have you ever sold any of your artwork, or is it something just for you and yourself?
Just something for me and myself, something for me to enjoy with my children. Ever since I had these babies in my life, it's always been for my children. I've really dedicated most of my time to my babies, my wife, and the life that we enjoy together.
And I think that's ultimately, you were given the opportunity. You had your life impacted. You've lost a portion of your right leg, a portion of your right arm, but you were given your life.
Right.
And I think that unfortunately, a lot of us, we take our life for granted. I don't want everybody to experience what you experienced, but some of us need that experience to, okay, this is what's important to me.
Sure.
And you are basically Mr. Mom today, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
What does your wife do?
She's a registered nurse. She worked as a registered nurse in the hospital for about 3 years before becoming a Botox injector. And so she does that primarily. She has a business here in town, and then she does clinical work in San Diego twice a week. So she loves what she does. And she loves being a business owner, and she couldn't ask for more.
Do you guys get back to Hawaii often?
We were there last year. before that, maybe the year before.
So is it with the time away, the family connections, I don't want to say diminishing, but there's less and less family?
Living out here?
No, living there.
Oh, no, all of our family's still there.
Your wife also is from Hawaii, or is she from Southern California?
She's from Southern California. Yeah. Originally they moved from the Philippines. Her father's a doctor here in town, and they'd been here since, I want to say 93.
You have any long-term plans of leaving Southern California?
Gosh, I'd love to.
Where would you, back to Alaska?
There's so many states. It's not just Alaska. I love Alaska. But Montana's gorgeous. I've hunted quite a bit in Texas, and Texas is gorgeous. I can see myself living in different places. It doesn't have to be Alaska.
Were you a hunter before the military?
No, I wasn't. I didn't grow up in the hunting world, nothing. And I had only been hunting for about the past 7 years now.
What got you into that?
A friend of mine, nonprofit organization who links up with veterans, disabled veterans, and takes them out on hunting trips. And so I'd become very good friends with the owner of one of them, and had become very good friends with a lot of other gentlemen who attend these trips as well. And so my best friend, who lives in Winchester, we go on our own, we'll book our own hunts, and we'll go to Texas or go to Florida or wherever.
What gives you the most headaches when you're out, hunting?
Hunting gear. It's such a fumble. Walking around in prosthetics. So we were just in Canada last month hunting moose, and I had bought boots to take out because I heard the terrain was really rough. And so I put these boots on, and we walked for about 3 miles. We walked 3 miles out and 3 miles back. And by the time I'd gotten back, I had blisters on my feet. My feet were super sore. And so I ditched them. I took them off, and I had hunted barefoot for the rest of the week. And it had been so much easier to get through the terrain barefoot than it was in the hunting boots. And I actually forgot the question that you just asked.
I was just, obviously adapting to hunting as an amputee, and I was just kind of wondering, obviously I can imagine just the humping alone,
right,
is going to be exacerbated by having to deal with prosthetics. Right. But now you're dealing with all the gear and the equipment also. Yeah.
So what I found is that the less gear, the better. We go fishing in Alaska, and all of my friends wear waders, and they stand in the water and they're wading, they're fishing salmon, and I'm the only one out there in shorts, shorts and barefoot. But the less gear, the better. That's what I found.
And what do you enjoy hunting the most?
Ooh, deer. Axis deer is probably my favorite.
And what you got any big trips planned for this coming year?
I was given an opportunity to go to Florida next month. Turned that one down, but I always plan hunting trips with my buddy and my best friend that lives in Winchester. And so we're probably going to hit up Texas, probably somewhere around March.
And what will you go after in Texas?
Axis deer. More meat for the freezer.
Where's your bucket list hunting spot? Where haven't you hunted that you want to, or
Africa.
You want to do a safari type?
I don't know if I want to do a hunt in Africa, but I would love to sit in on one, just to see the animals, just to be part of the environment, just to breathe that air. I think that would be amazing, but there's so many beautiful animals out there. I'm not sure which one I would want to take, and I'd hate to take one just to take it.
What's been the hairiest or most dangerous experience hunting? While you've been out hunting?
I don't think I've had dangerous.
I'm not a hunter, but I hear the stories of people who have encountered bear or large cats, like while they're hunting, and
No, nothing like that. We're usually pretty safe. Everyone's proficient in using firearms, so nothing like that. Usually just a good time.
Well, it definitely sounds, I think the one thing that I found most inspiring about you is you didn't let your injuries stop you. You've obviously, clearly, taken full advantage of your life post injury. And I think that that's very inspiring. To kind of wrap this up, any last minute advice you'd give to somebody who's been in your shoes, kind of going through that process of transitioning out as an injured, disabled vet?
If you have depression issues, see somebody for it. If you don't think you can do it, I believe you can. Find somebody who believes that you can. If you need help, find it. Other than that, always push forward, always try, If somebody wants to reach out to you personally, can they? Absolutely.
What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Email, wallacefanene@gmail.com.
And I'll put that in the show notes.
Right on.
I appreciate your time, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, man.
I look forward to more roles.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.